Well, for more on the Import Expo and its significance, I'm joined by Professor Arthur Dong from Georgetown's McDonough School of Business. Arthur, it's great to see you again.
Thank you, Sean, for
Last
inviting me here.
time we chatted, I was just on my way to China, so it's interesting the way this whole symmetry continues to build. I want to talk, I don't want to paint everything black and white, but tell me about your overall takeaway from this, because there were certainly a lot of positives, and as Roy mentioned, some hurdles that China had to clear as well.
Certainly, I think this is a watershed moment in China's economic history, in that many of the previous sort of trade expositions and shows that China has conducted were mostly directed towards Chinese entities and Chinese companies trying to engage with the world and find marketplaces to sell. So most of those, like the Great Canton Trade Fair, all about Chinese companies wanting to sell their products in global markets. For the first time, and it's refreshing to see that China has now created a trade fair that is ostensibly geared towards telling the rest of the world, what can you sell us? That China's open, that we're open for business, and we have a great appetite to import the products of the rest of the world.
Not only open for business, they had a lot of takers as well. A lot of multi-billion-dollar deals were approved, were signed. Walk me through who you think were the big winners and who are the losers in all this? Perhaps some nations that sat on the sidelines?
Yeah, well, the United States apparently had the third largest, in a sense, presence in terms of booths at this trade show. Japan and Korea had very, very large presence there. The United States did not send, of course, any governmental officials or any sort of officials from the White House. But what you saw was a private sector initiative at this trade show, many American companies showing up, both small and large, wanting to partake in this ongoing growth of China's enormous economy.
And some energy sector jobs, very big deal signed as well.
Yeah, energy is, in a sense, one of the single largest imports that China has, and that number is going to continue to grow as a result of their enormous energy needs.
Well, so let's talk a bit more about that, about all these entities that were involved. We talked about the energy sector, steel industry as well, cars. What is this going to mean from the Expo standpoint? The first one, I think if you listen to Rowie and what other people had to say, it was an unqualified success. Looking forward to next year, what is the Expo going to mean to China?
I think the Expo is going to demonstrate, well, China wants to demonstrate to the rest of the world that it is a fair player, that it wants to be as transparent as possible, that it wants to level the playing field for its trade partners in order to engage in the Chinese and partake in the Chinese domestic economy. I think you're going to see greater trade liberalization in terms of their import regime, lowering of trade barriers, the lowering of tariffs on a variety of products, the enforcement of intellectual property rights. All of these sort of items and key things that President Xi wants to address and sort of assuage the rest of the world, that we're not only open for business, but we're going to level the playing field and make it easier for you to participate in our economy.
What do you think that's going to mean by leveling the playing field? Because you look at a nation of 1.4 billion people that is without question changing from wanting to be the manufacturer for the world to meeting the needs of its growing middle class. The people in China want better produced products, higher quality products, and higher end products.
Yeah, I think what you speak of is this transformation, sort of the transformation and rebalancing of China's economy, becoming less dependent on being sort of an export powerhouse and more dependent on sort of generating demand from its enormous consumer economy. And so we see that transition being made presently. We see from a policy perspective that they want to encourage this transition in order to have a more balanced economy. And so when you unleash the animal spirits of 1.3 potential billion customers, that's going to spell enormous opportunities for many, many companies around the world.
I want to get this right. 172 nations or regions were there, a ton of people. President Xi Jinping kicked off the Expo by focusing on China opening up, saying that globalization, economic globalization, is an irreversible historic trend. Wrote some notes down before I came out here. What do you think of that? And while other nations are circling the wagons and focusing on nationalism, here's one that's broadening up and saying we're open for business.
Yeah, I think we're at a very interesting crossroads in history right now, where we see the withdrawal from this notion of globalization and trade on the part of the United States and other countries as well, and China carrying the torch and saying we're the protector and the promoter of global trade. And so China wishing to promote itself as well as make a statement to the rest of the world that the world has a lot to gain by sort of reinforcing the notions of global trade.
It's interesting to be an observer at this crossroads, as you mentioned. Arthur Dong, thanks very much from Georgetown's McDonough School of Business. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.